Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Between Podcast. This is your host, Matt Matson. And today I'm joined by two guests, both of whom I just think are the bee's knees, you guys. They are the host of the Deconstructing Mamas Podcast. And listen, I don't want to brag, but I was a guest on their show. And honestly, I just loved it. I should say, I really am a devout listener to the Deconstructing Mamas Podcast, even though I am technically neither a mama nor would I really say that I'm obviously deconstructing my faith, but it is that good of a show. I really love learning from these two women. Before I formally introduce you both, Lizz and Esther, and I'll share a fancy bio about each of you. I like to, I don't know, I love to learn about people by peeking in on snapshots of their regular life. Maybe I could ask you both to tell us about some interaction you've had recently, or I don't know, some moment in your ordinary life that felt sacred to you. Esther,
Hmm.
how about I turn to you first?
Yeah, I love what you do. First of all, I'm all about this between stuff and having the sacredness be, where you and I,
Yeah.
the space between us, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just go to a story with I have a friend who is not doing well, but I didn't know she was not doing well. And it was a Sunday morning, and I'm a big like nobody bother me on Sunday. But it was about 7:30 in the morning, and she said, "Do you have a minute?" And I knew, "Do you have a minute?" meant it wasn't a minute and it was an emergency. And so um, just got on the phone with her. We talked for a little while. And I think that some of the things we don't talk about, I'm going to go right deep, is sometimes the space between us has to do with pain
Mm.
or heartache. And a lot of times I don't think that people are very good at sitting in that or being with that. And I just felt so, I guess, honored or that I would be the person that she would call when she was in the most pain.
Yeah.
And in fact, right before this episode, I just got off the phone with her again, and we've been walking the last 2 weeks through her crisis. And I just feel like that has been a very, very, very powerful, meaningful thing just today and in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. When somebody lets you be their person in their dark moments, that is, I don't know. I'm not sure how to describe that. Maybe this early in the podcast, we'll come up with words for that as we go, but it feels like God pointing at you. That's how it
Mhm.
feels to me. Anytime I find myself in those moments, it's like God pointing and circling, me on the map and saying, this is your moment. This is kind
Mhm.
of what we've been talking about. This is what we're preparing for, right? This is how
Mhm.
we're supposed to show up for each other. Man, to get that phone call, Esther, is both painful and a big honor. It's heavy, and somehow you get to be bright in that moment for someone, right?
Mhm.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. What a wonderful way to open up our conversation, Esther. This is why
Yeah, right to pain.
yeah, heck yeah. Heck yeah. That's perfect.
But it is the universal human experience, and so
Yeah,
it is very sacred to share in somebody's heartache. So yeah.
it is. All right, Liz, I'm gonna turn to you now.
Man. I mean, I think if you would have asked me that question like many, many years ago, I would have picked out a moment that, felt churchy,
Hmm.
felt holy in that sort of churchy way, right? Like it was obvious that, God was in it but I think what I'm realizing is that these all of the mundane moments in our lives um kind of all come together to be sort of like Esther was talking about, right? Like there's like this sort of painful, like messy, but like holy spiritual sort of experience that we have. And I have two young kids, and recently, things are tough sometimes when you have two
Hmm.
young kids and when you're working through your own stuff, and there's hard things happening outside in the world. And recently I've been really like grabbing hold of these really tiny moments. The other day my daughter, she was like watching her iPad on the couch. She's 6, and she just stuck her little foot out and put it like right on my knee.
Hmm.
And I was just like looking at her teeny tiny toes, when she's 6 and she thinks she's 20 years old and she has all the answers at 6. She's in kindergarten. And I was just looking at her little tiny toes, and like, for whatever reason in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing that she's like a little person, you know? And she's been sort of like, created in such a like specific, like toes are so wild to me. Like, it was just an interesting moment for me. And obviously, like, not every moment, feels wonderful and amazing when you're parenting. And I don't always look at my kids and go, oh man, everything about you is wonderful. We have those moments that are tricky, but I'm learning how to hold on to those teeny tiny moments that are ordinary but feel really special, or remind me of how beautiful the ordinary is.
Yes. I love that you started all that, Liz, by saying, maybe there was a time in your life when you would have answered any question that had the word sacred in it by thinking of churchy things, right? I don't know, let me tell you about my small group I had. Let me tell you about a youth camp I went to. Let me tell you about the sermon this weekend. But a 6-year-old puts their foot up on you and you notice how just magical and truly sacred it is to be with them in that moment, to be family, to be connected, to be here right now. Like, what else? What could be more than that? What could be more godly than that? What could be more sacred than that? I sometimes think I love. Wow, both stories, both wonderful snapshots into your normal, everyday, ordinary lives, regular stuff that I think any listener probably has some point of reference to, right? Every listener has some point of reference to one or likely both of those stories of noticing in ordinary moments the beauty of life and of being there for somebody in the dark moments. Yeah, heck yeah, you two. What a fun. Thanks. I like that you two are on this show right now. This is gonna be fun. I knew it. Shall I introduce you both formally now? Is it all right with both of you if I read the bios and make you sound as important as you are? Okay, I'm getting head nods. Let's do it.
We are important. You're not just going to make us sound important. I'm kidding.
That's
I don't know. I'm pretty ordinary, but do your best, Matt.
All right. All right. Let's start with you then, Liz. Lizz Enns Petters is a passionate voice for so many people out there. She encourages her readers and listeners around themes of motherhood, mental health, and mindful Christianity. Her father is biblical scholar Pete Enns, and she's a chip off the old block, as they say. Liz is deeply passionate about creating a space for spiritual misfits. I love that phrase, spiritual misfits, so that they can find a sense of safety and belonging on their own faith journeys. She's especially passionate about empowering young moms and parents who are doing the hard work of healing themselves while raising kids. Liz has young kids of her own, as we all know already, and so much of her fantastic online content is about the exciting, beautiful, sometimes difficult, and often hilarious life of being a mother with little ones. Liz was diagnosed with anxiety, OCD, and a panic disorder at a young age, and those diagnoses have also been a big part of her life. Liz, I love anytime your voice shows up on the podcast, or so often, I mean, on your social media feed, you are just writing poignant content, and your voice just seems to be a way of, you're able to collect all these different tones, I think, that are out there. The hurried and grossly underappreciated mothers of the world, the kids who have been through things and now are adults and are trying to get through things, the people who are trying to find their way in the middle of a messy religious Christian social landscape. I just think your voice reflects so many of those tones in such a wonderful way. And anyway, I just wanted to uplift that and say I'm really glad you're here. All right,
I'm
Esther.
glad she's here too. I'm glad she's here too, Matt.
Esther Joy Goetz was born and grew up as an evangelical missionary kid. Esther has written that her parents' mission was to keep the people they encountered in war-torn Ethiopia from going to hell. That's a childhood. She lives in rural New Jersey and loves the outdoors. Esther's kids are grown now, and she has a grandson and a granddaughter on the way. She has a fierce passion for helping people to uncover what's been hidden, to discover what's been lost, and to recover what's been wounded in their lives so that they might know and love their truest and most healed selves. She does all this through her books, her spiritual direction practice, which I think is new, right, Esther? Like that's a
No,
big
new,
deal.
like
Yeah.
new,
Like brand new. Yeah. Like that's a huge
brandy
deal. I
new.
know you've been working really hard toward that, and I'm excited for you, that new spiritual direction practice, and of course the podcast that she shares with Liz, and hopefully just by being a sanctuary, a safe place for any and all who come across her path. This is a fun fact for everybody listening. Both Liz and Esther have contributed to our between 5-ish minute sermons that we put on YouTube. They've both delivered one as guest preachers. And I want to encourage anybody out there to go to our YouTube channel and check out those. Hey, I want to ask you both about things that you've written. I really like to ask smart people to dive into their own words and find out what's behind them. Liz, I think this was from you. I think you wrote this. We can question each other's religious beliefs without questioning each other's worth as human beings. That is simple and poignant. And that should be obvious, but it's not. I mean, this is a message we really do have to post on social media in the year 2024. What is wrong with our world? Here's my question to you. What's going on underneath people that so many people are questioning other people's worth as human beings just because they don't share the same understanding of God or of faith?
There's just so much fear. I think so much is fear driven. I mean, it really truly is. It's the fear that if we kind of let go of our belief, holding on to our belief system so tightly that we're going to miss the mark, or we're going to end up in hell, right? That's a big one. If we allow somebody else's opinions or their thoughts or their interpretation of the Bible to kind of creep into our belief system, that there's going to be trouble. So I think it largely is led by fear. But I do find myself sometimes going, but why can't we just, right, separate our belief systems from just this idea that we're human people? And just because I don't believe in a literal hell doesn't mean that I'm less of a human being and less loved by God. And just because you do not, whoever you, not necessarily you, Matt, but whoever believes, right, in a literal hell, that they, that they're less of a human being, right? We all have reasons for believing what we believe. And if we're not, hurting other people, then I think there's room for different belief systems.
Yeah. Fear as the easy and obvious and correct, I think, thing to point to. I often wonder, Liz, I'm gonna ask you to go even further, because I often wonder, like, I don't know, if somebody believes in a literal hell, like, let me go there. If that's what they think, like, why bother me? What? I don't, maybe you grew up with this desire to save people, and sort of this drive or call or command to save people. And if you didn't do that, you weren't doing enough for God. I didn't grow up that way. And so a lot of times that mindset like, genuinely, I don't mean to be snarky. I mean to genuinely say, like, I don't get it. I'm lost in that stuff. Does any of that resonate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in general, when you grow up sort of believing that it's like up to you to save humanity, like you take that so seriously. And I mean, you lead with that in like everything that you do. And you feel like if you aren't leading with that, you're letting other people down, or you're letting God down. And so I think it can be very like well intentioned, but I think that I definitely am in this place now where, like, I'll kind of go anywhere with anyone. Like, you believe that? Like, let's kind of what you said, Matt. Like, let's go there. Like, let's talk about it. I'm open to hearing what you have to say, right? If your main goal isn't to try to pull me in your direction, I'm willing to go there with you and hear it, right? If you'll allow me to hear it and then sort of like walk the other way if it doesn't work for me, right? Like, but I think that there isn't really, especially in like the modern American church, there just isn't really a lot of space for that, I think, for somebody with a differing belief to say, like, hey, let me hear what you have to say, but I don't really agree with that, but I'm willing to listen to you. And I'm not going to call you an idiot because you believe something different than me. There's just not a lot of room for conversation.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That comment, and I strongly agree with it. I think in the modern American church, there's not a lot of space for somebody to say, I'm not really sure I agree with that. I'm not sure I agree with you, or I'm going to show. one thing I love about my home church, one of the reasons I found a healthy, safe home church that I get to go to and develop spiritually is because it is one of those places. It is literally one of those places where people show up and they're like, I don't buy any of this crap. But I'm gonna show up here Sunday because you all seem nice and we're doing good work. And it's a space where everybody's like, cool, like that's fine. You can totally be here that way. But I really think I found a unicorn. I think it is a rare,
Mm,
rare
yeah.
experience out there. I'm sure there's more, and I keep bumping into more and more hope out there on the internet. I keep finding that there's more and more good stuff happening in the American Christian church, but so much of it just doesn't allow a lot of space for even
Mm,
questions, much less disagreement.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally true.
Esther,
We definitely
I,
have had some people on our podcast who have churches like that.
yeah,
And like there's probably like 5 different states now that I'm like planning to move to because I'm
yeah,
like these churches they exist, right? Like they
yeah,
exist and they're there and they definitely are there and they definitely do exist. But like on average, if you walk into a church and you're an incredibly progressive Christian, right? Or maybe even agnostic, you're not going to feel safe and welcome. That's
yeah,
just like the bottom line. And we have to be willing to look at that. We have to be willing to say like this is a problem that needs to be changed and not just
yeah.
ignored.
Yeah. I actually had another sacred space today that related to this.
hmm,
Um, a girl who is a friend of mine's daughter. So my kids grew up with her. We were all very conservative in our faith. And of course, our family has moved away from that those rigid faith systems. And I thought it was like a spam note on Facebook. She was like, hey, my phone got lost and I lost your
hmm,
phone number. So then I texted her from my phone. I was like, hey, did you message me? And we ended up having a conversation. She's a young mom. And we kind of went back and forth, and it was very cordial and kind. And she was like, well, this is what I believe still. And I was like, well, this is actually where I'm going. She asked me a couple questions. And then I just said, oh, well, this is somebody that maybe you would want to follow on Instagram if you're really into gentle parenting. I jumped on that like white on
yeah,
rice
yeah,
because it was a connection for us. I'm really into the whole gentle parenting. And I thought, oh, here she is in still this high rigid religion. And she was saying how much the Bible's giving her peace and hope. And I was like, I'm so happy for you.
Mm,
And I just said, I'm really
mhm,
glad if it's bringing you peace. And then I asked what her favorite part of motherhood was. She said it. And then she said, we're trying to do the gentle parenting thing. And literally, I was like, oh, well, there's a connection point.
yeah,
That's something that I really believe in. And there's a space that we can then continue to talk and converse. And in the end, she said, oh, I still believe kids are sinners. And I was like, yeah, I've read this book called Original Blessing.
mhm,
And so I just want you to know what's going on with me. And it was a very nice conversation. And it ended. It was a unicorn, as we're all talking
yeah,
about. And it just kind of ended. And nobody was trying to convince anybody else. And we just stopped texting. And I was like, whoa.
yeah. I
I
love
love
that.
that.
Yeah, I love that you were like, whoa, because that is such a shouldn't you have just described the most ordinary conversation most of us should have on it? Like, shouldn't that be the description of, sure, yeah, well, big deal. But I'm guessing for most people listening, they'd be like, no, that was a huge deal. Like that to be able to have that kind of conversation with someone you know. And I love that you connected over something practical, like a way of being that is,
Mhm.
by the way, I think rooted in, I think we could connect it to some theological
Yes.
underpinnings, but what it really was we moved away from the check boxes in our head of do you believe this? Do you believe this? Do you believe this? What's your opinion on this issue? This issue, right? There's this weird like belief check box that many people I think automatically go to find out if we're on the same team when you kind of you did that, but then moved beyond it to well, how can we live? How can we deal with the real challenges in our life? Being a mom, gently
Right.
in difficult moments, like how can we do that?
Right.
I love that. That's good.
Oh,
That's a
yeah.
fun
It was
story.
just a weird
Well,
thing.
it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like you both heard each other, which I think is huge. And that doesn't always happen, right? You both heard what the other person was trying to say. And it doesn't sound like either one of you were trying to like sway the other person or pull them. It was just sort of like, oh, here's some information if you want to look at it, or here's some like, and I think those can be the most sacred conversations I know, and I've had conversations like that, they've been more sacred than conversations that I've had with people, like-minded people.
Yeah. That's
Because
interesting.
they push you more, and they have you thinking more, and they have you empathizing more with somebody who might believe something totally different, or something that you might highly disagree with, right? But you're able to empathize with them in like a human way. I just think that can be so powerful. But you're right, they're unicorn conversations. They don't happen that often.
Yeah. If our intention is not, if we show up with an intention of convincing or converting or conniving someone, right? Like it's probably pretty hard to find real human connection, much less anything that
Mm.
truly feels sacred, something that
Mm-hmm.
truly feels like God is in the middle of
Mm.
it. That's a powerful comment. Esther, you
Mm.
wrote something really cool I want to dive into. Not long ago, you wrote this piece that was like 5 personal values you bring to your home and your interactions in the world. And let me just I'm gonna say these slowly so our listeners can write them down in the pages of notes that they're probably taking. But you listed these 5 things: presence, engagement, welcome, transformation, and mercy. And I just think, like, first of all, what a powerful thing for any individual to have a list of 5 values that I'm trying really hard to live into, right? I actually think that's a fun exercise for that a lot of people haven't done. What are the ways I'm trying to live? As a parent, gosh, I mean, I feel like I went 12 years of parenting before I thought, what am I actually trying to teach these kids? Like, what are my wife and I actually aiming at? Have we circled it? Have we talked about it? Right? Like, so to really name those 5 things, presence, engagement, welcome, transformation, and mercy. Will you talk about either transformation or mercy in more depth? Those words are really
Mm.
beautiful words to identify as your own values that you're aiming for.
Hmm. Yeah, so I pulled up my little piece here for those of you. No one can see this, so but I do I think this is born actually out of a book I read a long time ago when I was like a conservative church person, called like The Purpose Driven Life.
Yeah,
And
sure.
yeah, by
Mm.
Rick Warren. And he had like, come up with your 5 purposes and then live out of them. Now, I think I did come up with my 5 purposes way back when. I would be curious to find that list
Yeah.
compared to the list I would make 20 years later. Oh, that's actually a project I think I'm going to do. But transformation for me is a huge one. And I think it's speaks to those 3 core things I said about discovering, uncovering, and recovering our true selves.
Mhm.
Um, I I always talk about the idea of a caterpillar to a butterfly, that they're all the same creature.
Hmm.
Like the caterpillar is fully the caterpillar. When they're in the cocoon, they're fully that gooey mess. And then when they're the butterfly, they're fully the butterfly. And all 3 of those parts of, I guess, that creature, or roles, or I don't even know,
Yeah.
timelines, are all fully that creature. And so one is not more important than the other. They're
Yeah.
all absolutely necessary. But there is this transformation that takes place because the caterpillar wasn't designed to stay a caterpillar forever. It actually is designed to fly. The same way as we're not designed to stay kids forever. We're designed to become adults and go off on our own and bloom and fly, quote unquote. So I think that transformation thing with that image in mind is, what do I have to do to provide a space for that in my own life and in the lives of other people? And I definitely believe God is the source and center of all that I am and do. I've had this weird thing where I'm calling God glove recently, like God and love combined. So
Huh.
like, I don't know where God and love, like they
Are you doing
like
that? Are you doing that on accident, or is that like just a slip of the tongue, or are you doing it on purpose? That's kind
on
of fun.
purpose. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like, where does God end and love begins? I think that
Yeah.
they're just the same. And I like the hand and the glove thing or
Yeah.
whatever. So I just have been calling God glove. So I say that where I believe that that God's love or glove is the primary attribute of whatever the source of us is.
Yeah.
and I'm always half thoughting about what I think God is, right?
Yeah.
But if I go right now to love, and then in the transformation, I think that we have to wrestle with our questions and our doubts and not shove them down. I feel like that's that cocoony kind of waiting, messy middle. Liz is so good at this. This is my favorite thing about Liz. She goes right to that ooey gooey, messy crap that nobody else wants to do. Maybe that I did with my friend, right? And I'm doing with my friend. But I also think that wrestling with those doubts, not in a shameful place, but and we just had somebody on our podcast talk about this, compassionate curiosity, like holding that space. So then when other people are going through that compassionate curiosity is what I'm after, because we're not changing because of shame. I mean, we will change briefly externally, but we're not having true transformation unless it's from a posture of grace, right? And compassion. So, and probably curious nature, like just noticing, hey, this is going on. Wonder what that's about. And so, yeah. And I think like that's the way we can recover from our past hurts, to uncover them and then to recover from all that woundedness. So, yeah. And then I think the last thing is for me, which is also a weird space, is the Bible to me was the end all be all, the Holy Scripture. And now I view that scripture as more a starting point, like a caterpillary kind of time where it's a lot of information. I'm munching on information. And now I have been able to broaden where I'm able to say, well, there's other information. It's not just the Bible. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah.
And then, so I use it as like a starting point, but not an ending point, if that makes sense. And so that's kind of my transformation thing, where I feel like the Bible has been so powerful in my life to get me to think. I wouldn't know, and I'm still a big Jesus lover. I wouldn't know Jesus if it weren't for the Bible.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know about him. I wouldn't know what's going on with his life. And that is so powerful. But again, it's information and not transformation. Transformation comes as a result of chewing on that stuff and then going into those doubts and questions and curiosities. And then hopefully coming out the other side where you're much like living in a much freer place.
Yeah. I know that the caterpillar butterfly metaphor has been used by 1,000 people before, and you know that, but there is a reason for it. There is something like, if you look at that metaphor, you can see yourself in it, and you can see, I don't know, first of all, I got 1,000 thoughts. One of them is you can't shame a worm into becoming a butterfly. You just can't do it. There's no transformation in shame. I think you said that, Esther. That is a really powerful thing. You can only let a creature be what it's supposed to be, and caterpillars are supposed to be caterpillars until they're not, until they go through that messy, gooey experience. And what a metaphor for deconstruction in a faith space. What a metaphor for parenting most of the time, just feeling like you're covered in goo until hopefully you come out the other side and you did it okay. What a metaphor for everybody. I think life, right? This idea of transformation. Esther, I love that you want to have encounters with people that creates a space for them to transform. That is that itself is what a wonderful life value. What a way to enter into a conversation with someone. You're not trying to change them. You're trying to create space where they can become their fullest self. Wow, Esther, sign me up. I want to be a butterfly. Yeah.
You're so cute, Matt.
I am. I get that a lot. Okay, so you said glove as your answer to this question, Esther. So let me ask Liz this question. It's a big fluffy question. I want to see where this goes. But Liz, where do you find God when you feel God, or hear God, or sense God today? Like in this moment of your life, what is God like for you?
God for me is very much like inside of myself. right now in this moment. Like that's kind of where I am in my journey. Not that I don't experience God through the world, because I do, but I think after years and years of God being like an other and an outside, I'm realizing that this idea of Holy Spirit inside of us, right? Like in our very soul is meaningful, and it wasn't just random mush words, right? And so as I'm going through my deconstruction journey, my trauma healing journey, my gentle parenting journey, all of those things that are very inward, healing, soft,
Mm.
um i'm I'm spending a lot of time like kind of cocooned, to be
Mm,
honest.
yeah.
I mean, really just sort of like in my own self, and I'm finding God in all of my tiny like healing moments.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
it's been life changing for me, I think, to see God in my own self.
Mm,
Um, and I got a lot of disagreements. People hate that so much.
sure.
But it's been healing, and yeah, I truly believe that God, whoever and whatever God is in every single one of us. And so I think, when you don't really know which way is up, the best thing to do is to look inward and to really align with your own soul. And I feel like God is always there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
beautiful. And I gotta believe, in fact, I know for sure because you kind of preached about this in a way in the between 5 minute sermon that you did for us a while ago, Liz. But um, if you see God inside, and especially meet God in the soft work of healing trauma, the soft work of becoming a gentle parent, the soft work, uh, man, I got to believe that that shapes the way that you interact with people. It shapes the way you interact with
Mm.
your kids. It shapes the way you interact with your partner, your loved ones, your the people around you, the people that you interact with at the grocery store. Sometimes, right? Like I'll bet that that shapes the way that you interact with people. Can you talk about that, Liz?
I mean, that's my desire, I think,
Mm-hmm.
deep down,
Mm-hmm.
that even if I'm just putting all faith and spirituality aside, like when I come from a place of healing, when I'm interacting with other people, like that's what they're going to absorb. They're going to absorb a more whole version of me, a more loving version of me, a less
Mm.
wounded version of me,
Yeah.
right? And so I think it's true in my spirituality as well. Like when I really take the time to like know who I am and heal some of those core hurts, and then also just be open to like the humanity and the spiritual experience of somebody else, when I'm healed enough to not get defensive about someone else's position,
Mm-hmm.
I think it changes everything. And Esther and I have talked just more specifically about how when we took hell off the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when we realized that we don't need to save all these people from this kind of like horrible end, that it changed the way that we interacted with people, because we no longer felt like we needed to change their minds about something, or we
Mm-hmm.
needed to pull them onto our side. And I do think that makes like such a huge difference when we're relating to other people. Now, I mean, obviously, like, do I always do it right? No. Am I still very much on a journey?
Sure.
Do I feel like I get defensive sometimes with people who believe things that are different than me, especially when it's something that I've come from before, right? And it was wounding to me. It's
Yeah.
hard for me sometimes to interact with those people. So I don't always get it right, but I think that's the goal. Like, the goal is to start inward, to align with my own self, to find healing and wholeness within my own self and with God in that way, and then to be able to love others better and more
Mm.
fully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting that you're saying that, Liz. I was just thinking about the way you opened the podcast, Matt, where you said, why is it that we have so much a problem, um, with difficult conversations where we aren't necessarily in agreement? And I think that Liz is really on to something. If we understand that God is in us, ourselves, in me,
Yeah.
if I get a grasp on God is in me, then God is in you
Mm-hmm.
at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my approach is very different if I believe that everybody is walking around like God with skin on, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it does. It's like the fancy word that people have used in Christianity is an image bearer.
Yeah.
I would even go further to say, like, yeah, we are the image bearers, but it's actually not an external, it's like an internal image bearer. We are actually like God walking around with skin on. And I don't know, it does change the way I view and talk to people. Yeah.
Yeah, that idea that if I am made of God parts, then you are made of God parts, right? Like that's actually not something that it took a long, long time for me to find that in Christianity. I'll be honest. I didn't see that message. That was not a message that was brought to the surface for me in any way that resonated. But when I was in my study everything Buddhist I can find phase in college or right after college, I remember learning this concept, this Buddhist concept of, I don't know what it's called, but this Buddhist concept of every living creature in some past lifetime has been your mother. And that's like this metaphor of compassion and of honoring every sentient being. And but just the idea, if Buddhism believes in reincarnation, if that's part of if that's a model for understanding not just the afterlife but the current life, then everybody you encounter, in fact every animal you encounter, in fact every bug every ant you encounter has at one point in the vast eons of history at one point been your mother. And like that is like and so treat them that way, sort of this, how can you, I've always loved that simple imagery. That's a fun metaphor that helped me really think about other people as image bearers, to use that phrase, well before I had any meaningful understanding of that in the Christian context.
Well, I even think about Jesus saying, like, hey, the widow that you visited, the prisoner, all those things you did. It's like, I'm in all of those people.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing it to me. And so, I mean,
but
even
how much
Jesus,
less complicated, right? Like, how much less complicated is it to be like, oh, well, you're the bad guy and you're the good guy? Like, it's right. It's so much less complicated to just start like labeling people off instead of like somehow holding space for, maybe the awful pieces of humanity, right? Because there are them. We all have them in us. We all have experienced them, like those sort of hard pieces of humanity and then also those wonderful pieces and these loving pieces of people. Like, I mean, it's very confusing and complicated. So like, of course, right? Like our knee-jerk reaction would be like, well, you're in this category and you're in this category and everything's separated and there's formulas for everything. Like, that's just the knee-jerk reaction. It's so much harder to like just to sit with somebody in their humanity and not attach them to like every little bit of how they respond to the world. It's so much trickier that way.
Oh, we've built so many easy ways to make people abstractions. We built a million categories. If there are 8 billion people, we've also built 8 billion categories to put people in so that they don't seem like a human to us. They seem like an abstraction. They seem like a concept. They seem like a Republican or a Democrat or a Presbyterian or an evangelical or we've got every possible category at our disposal because we created those categories because it makes it easy for us to not see those people as human, especially the people that we disagree with, especially the people that make us angry and especially the people who have hurt us. And that's where it gets real hard, I think, to be honest, right? It's really hard there. I want to know, I don't think I know this, and maybe it's because I didn't listen to the early, maybe the first episode or something like that of the Deconstructing Mamas podcast, or maybe I did, but it's been a while. What's the origin of that podcast? I mean, Deconstructing Mamas is a pretty particular niche to have picked out of the world, and it's worked. But I also sense that obviously, that's part of both of your stories, but you were probably tuning into like a frequency of people out there who were longing, who needed something, who were hurting, and who needed to know that they weren't alone. What's the story?
Who are you asking? Us? One of us? Both of us?
Yeah, Esther, you go first. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks to COVID, which is funny. Thanks to COVID. I think of all the weird gifts that came out of COVID, and this podcast was really born from that place. Liz happens to be a young mom who is friends with my daughter in Pennsylvania. I happened to listen to Liz's dad's podcast, and we didn't know there was a connection until the beauty of social media, when my daughter was like, "Mom, I think my friend Liz is like that guy Pete Enns, who you listen to his podcast. I think that's his daughter." And so I was a little bit crushing on Liz for a minute. So anyhow, in the end of the in the end of the day,
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, it's okay. I was just crushing on Liz mostly because she was a really, really good friend to my daughter.
Yeah.
When they were just having new babies. That's probably the real actual reason I was crushing on her. Not to give a shout out to her dad, but that's probably the actual underneath reason why I wanted to connect with her. And somehow a friend of mine said, "Hey, want to read a book? Because we're just bored out of our minds. We want to have like some Zoom book club." I'm reading a book, and it was Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And so I read the first chapter, felt like I had fallen off the pit of, I don't know, fallen down the slippery slope or something, and wanted to unpack it. And I asked my girls, did they want to do this with my friend and I? Because they both lived separate and we couldn't be together. And then my daughter Sarah said, "Well, I think Liz would want to be in this book club." So there was like 7 or 8 of us that first summer. We met on Monday nights, and I don't know, it wasn't that long after that Liz and I were just chatting. And I don't know, do you want to tell the rest of the story, Liz? Because I know your heart was in a place where you wanted.
Yeah. I mean, I was a young mom at the time, and had really just been struggling very specifically with being a mom who was deconstructing her faith and whose only example of parenting was like evangelical parenting models, and just felt like I was drowning. Like I didn't want to do it some of those ways that I had seen done. But didn't really know what the alternatives were. And I even feel like 6 years ago, like, I mean, deconstruction, that sort of like buzzword, right? And gentle parenting and all of that kind of stuff, like that sort of even just taken off in the last 6 years. Like I even felt like 6 years ago, there wasn't as much as I was seeing as there is now. And so I just felt really lost. Had this idea for kind of a while of kind of just doing a podcast about like this, like mostly because I needed it. But knew that I wasn't going to have the bandwidth to do that by myself. And so, this book club happened, and I mean, most people who know Esther know she's a go-getter, and she, like, when she's passionate about something, she just like hits the ground running. And we just like started talking and connecting, and she was like, I love that. I love that whole thing. And so we just did it. And it's been great. I mean, Esther has many more years of parenting under her belt than I do. And so she has like a unique perspective, and I'm just sort of in the thick of it, still sort of drowning. And so like we just, we've both learned a lot, I think, from our guests, and it's been just a really cool journey, an adventure for both of us.
Yeah, I would say one more thing too. As Liz, you were talking, I was thinking just a little bit about how one of the really important things that we have in common is exactly what we've been talking about today on this podcast, is how do we hold space for everybody in the room, the most conservative, rigid, like I, need this, all the way to somebody who maybe doesn't believe in God at all.
Yeah.
And yet the common denominator everybody has is we want to love our kids well. How do we do this? And we maybe know what we don't want to do, but we don't quite know what we do want to do. And we have some past wounds and some past traumas, and we don't even know ourselves. We're disconnected. Like that whole thing this is why it's such a good fit for me, because of the uncovering, recovering, and discovering all that stuff. And that's really what we need, because we don't want the next generation to grow up with a faith that they, as Meredith Miller puts, that they have to heal from. like we envy you sometimes, Matt, because you didn't grow up in kind of,
Yeah.
you kind of have some freedom that we don't
Yeah.
necessarily have. You're
Yeah.
not having to recover from all I mean, I'm sure you have your own wounds.
Sure.
But yeah. And so it's been really fun to see all the different things that are going on out there. We can't do all those things. We can't write curriculums, but we can connect people.
Yeah.
We can do that in between, like the between.
Yes.
We can be the space in between the resources and the people to provide, hey, this is someone who has a great resource. Like when you came on our podcast, we're like, wow, there's this whole community out there.
Yeah.
That maybe you want to be a part of. And
Yeah.
this might be a really good connection place for you. And there's this, as Liz says, an embodiment coach. When you felt so disconnected from your body,
Yeah.
you were raised, you don't want to do that to your kids.
Yeah.
So maybe you get your own healing in that. And so we're just trying to provide resources for people. But yeah, it's been fun. Liz is fun to do
That's
a
such
podcast
a good point. That's a good point, though, Esther. Like, we're not experts and we don't claim to be. That's not the point, you know, like, and I mean, we do get that pushback sometimes, like, who are you to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I'm not really anyone. I'm just somebody who has an SOS out about how to parent my kids differently, right? And who just like wants to learn and grow in a community. And so like we're just creating that space because for a long time we couldn't find it. And that's been, I think, the most powerful piece of it.
I love that your origin story, the origin story of the podcast is, first of all, it's an interaction that wouldn't have happened except, I think this is true, an interaction that is far less likely to have happened except that it happened during the pandemic and probably in the moments of the pandemic when we were all like, we've got to reinvent social connection. We've got to reinvent making new friends, right? Like and there was something horrible, weird, and also slightly wonderful about that moment that made us all try new things and go outside of our comfort zone of the people that we interacted with and the ways that we interacted with people to find new types of connection. And I just love that that's part of your story. I think the other thing is, I just love that yours is a story of new friends doing something with purpose together to help other people. If there are people out there who feel lonely, who feel disconnected, who feel like there's more for their life, look at just the example of you two, not even the content of what you're doing. Just look at the example of the two of you in different stages in life, built a friendship, built a relationship, said, let's do something for people, and then took action and did it. And your relationship grew, your friendship grew, and it's connected you to hundreds of other people. I mean, in real life, in real conversations that you've had, and thousands of other people who listen to you and who read your content. What a beautiful example of what sacred human connection really looks like in practice when we go outside of our normal routines and try, even when it's hard. I mean, gosh, Liz, you were in the middle of, you had tiny kids at the time, right? Like that is.
Yeah. I mean, my bandwidth was limited. Like I knew I needed to have somebody alongside of me who was going to like help move it along. I mean, I was like, I don't even know. I was like, I just had a baby. I mean, it was like, there was so many reasons not to do a podcast during that time. There was so many reasons. But it was, I mean, Esther was the right person to do it with. And she's really been able to help me like limp along when I haven't felt like I've been able to. And it's been a wonderful gift because it's something that I has been really sacred to me to be able to hear from other people. Like, how do we do this?
Yes.
How do we heal ourselves while we're trying to raise our children? Like, how do we do that? And can we talk about how hard it is? How many meds we need to be on, how many therapists we need to see. Like, can we talk about all of that? Because we're all over here drowning and we're all pretending like we're not, and it's not helping anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think the second piece too is how do we repair, you know, like that's my perspective I come from is like, how do we repair when we haven't done it well? Or when we wish we had done it differently, I would say, when there are regrets and always going from, sometimes I go back to the caterpillar, have a bunch more
Yeah.
information, and then I transform in a different way.
Yeah.
And it's just been really cool. I don't know. We're kind of like these different people. The way that Liz helps me is anytime I'm like, I'm not doing something, she's like, good, stop. Like, she's so good at that. And then I drag her along, and then she goes, you can stop now. And then I drag her along.
Yeah.
But like, I think my favorite thing, and you're a really good example of this, is when we have the conversations with our guests, a lot of times we get off, we say goodbye to the person, then we have like a little post podcast time together. And we're like, oh my gosh, that was so good. Like, we need that. So like Liz said, we're kind of giving ourselves what we need.
Yeah, we like debrief.
Yes.
We debrief. And sometimes we're like, okay, I'm signing up for what they're doing because I need it for myself, like, yeah.
So you've mentioned a few guests that you've had. Are there any, this is a fun opportunity to, I don't know, recommend some people out there that people check out or whatever, but like any guests that you've had that really stick in your memory, really stick in your heart? I'm sure all of them, of course, are your special butterflies, but who comes to mind right now in this moment that's their message is still singing to you in some way?
Other than Matt Matson?
Right. Well, we could actually just spend the rest of our time discussing Matt Matson on your podcast. I'm sure the most listened
Matt
highest
Matson is
demand.
at the top.
Right. Okay. But then who else? Yeah.
There's been so many. That is such a hard one. Yeah. I feel like there's just been so many. And would you have one? Go ahead, Esther.
I have one, I think, that affected me personally, not somebody who I've been so great, but there was one guest we had on in season, I think this past fall, named Mary DeYoung, and she has a whole thing called the Waymarkers, and she has this concept called rewilding your soul. And I've really
I listened to that one. Oh, I totally know which one. Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah.
I've really taken her stuff to heart. I have gone on a journey this year of rewilding my soul. And like, I bought her stuff. I mean, that's something that affected me personally. That's a better way to say, because all our guests have been amazing and I've learned so much, but that particular one for me was who the guest I connected with. And I went and I've like leapt into her stuff and done all her stuff. And that was, it was just called Rewilding Your Soul. And I listened to her thing yesterday morning. Like, I got this whole winter thing and I'm listening to it. I'm watching her on video.
Cool.
So maybe Liz, did you have somebody too, right? That probably you're
thinking? That's a good point. That's a good point to kind of go that route. Like who jumped out to me with what I needed the most. And I think for me, that would probably be Tara Tang. We did an episode with her on like embodiment and recovering from purity culture and that type of thing. And she wrote a book, Your Body is a Revolution. And I definitely have been in a space for the past year or so where embodiment has been really huge for me. I'm realizing how detached I've been from my body because of trauma and harmful religious beliefs and just all sorts of wonderful things that I'm recovering from. But I'm realizing how disconnected I've been from my body for so long. And I don't know how to connect. I find it scary to connect. And so she's been like a really wonderful guide for me. I've been working with her personally over the last few months, just trying to connect with just who I am, on a deeper level, and how I can kind of embrace the world around me without so much fear and anxiety, but just like exist and be able to exist and feel safe to exist. And she does a really great job of holding that space for people. So I would have to say her at this time in my life, because embodiment has been so huge for me, and it's tricky and I'm not good at it yet, but I am working on it, and that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the most, let me just say one quick thing. I think that's the most beautiful thing about our podcast and just our philosophy is everyone is not going to connect with every person. That's and right. That is what we talked about right at the beginning. Everyone is so different on all of their journeys. And someone might hear your episode, Matt, and be like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm longing for, or I need embodiment, or for me, I needed to connect with nature. So I need to rewild my soul, or whoever, I need to know this specific thing about how to raise my kid because I still love the Bible and I don't know how to do it. Or, and that is just the beauty of it. It's not like, oh, listen, every podcast is going to change your life, but there might be one that would transform you.
Yeah. Something I've been having these conversations with some people in my local network here in the Colorado area, faith leaders and folks who sort of represent the old institution of church, sort of the traditional way of doing church. And they're great people. But a lot of the conversations have been, so tell me about how is between creating quote unquote community? And what they mean is, casseroles in the church kitchen and church, a potluck in the basement. And like, that's community. That's the only way community could happen. We show up together on Sunday and we worship and we sing, and then we mill about awkwardly together for 2 hours afterwards. And that, right. Like community, standard, traditional community. But I've been having this realization of the community that I'm not sure I meant to, but the community that I've been blessed with and built. You all are a great example. And the guests that you're naming are such a great example of that too. People that maybe you wouldn't have really come across or you wouldn't have interacted with on your daily basis, and maybe you would have picked up their book at the bookstore, maybe, among 1,000 other things but there's this community of people here in the podcast world, people who are authors, people who are creators, people who are posting on social media, people who are thinking about faith differently. And many of them, by the way, don't agree. Many of them think about faith differently in very different ways and and love talking to each other and love being in community with each other. It's a peculiar community and we don't share potluck dinners very often, but like this, I feel a kinship with you all, and you're really doing a very different thing. If you looked at it closely, you're doing a very different thing than I'm doing, but I feel like we're working the same work, right? Like we're in the same field. And I appreciate that community. And I love you guys talking about that, some of those people that you've connected with and how they've helped you. What are each of you working on right now? What's energizing you in this season of your life? I know we're about out of time, so I just wanted to make sure that I hear what you're excited about right now. Esther, you've got books coming out, don't you? Don't you have like a series of these books coming out that you've been working on? What else? Can you talk about them?
I do. I mean, in this space, I have a mom's book, but that's like in a different space.
Yeah.
But in this space, I started a series. It's like a book of meditations, but because of the rewilding thing, see, it really affected me. I'm doing it through the seasons. So spring, winter, summer, and fall. I had winter. It's kind of coming to an end in February. And now I just published spring and their daily meditations, and they have a Christian accent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But they also have a evolving faith accent. And they also have like a mental health piece. It's really just what it means to be a human who's trying to figure out God and herself.
Yeah.
And so there's just daily, they're called Wit, Wisdom, and Whimsy. And you can get them on, and the one I have on now is just called Wit, Wisdom, and Whimsy Spring. And it starts March 1st. And you can get that either on Amazon or on an ebook on my website. So yeah.
And you are a
I'm a spiritual. Oh, whoops.
Yeah.
And yes, and the spiritual direction thing. I keep forgetting because it's just been such a normal, natural part of my life. It's new.
Yeah.
Yes. And as of February 18th, my website goes live, which is, I don't know when we're airing this. Sorry. My website is live. And I'm taking one-on-one spiritual directees. And my goal is, it's called Heard and Held. And that's the name of it. And it is those three things: uncover, discover, and recover what's been hidden, lost, and wounded. And just helping people to become their truest selves. No agendas.
Yeah. Heard and held. I love that. Congratulations. Those are both really big things.
Yeah. I'm very excited. Just finishing my training and I'm heading into my residency.
Yeah, cool. Good for you. Good for you. Esther, what are you excited, or Liz, what are you excited about right now? What's energizing you with or
Oh man, I'm
anything?
excited about everything Esther is doing. But I'm also I just got finished working on a cool children's project with a bunch of other people. So I'm sure there'll be some announcements for that soon, and I'm excited for that. And it's kind of gotten me thinking about my own involvement in the children's niche. I've like written a couple children's books in my brain.
Yeah.
So thinking about like moving that direction. So but definitely the podcast is my main thing right now. I just love it. And Esther and I are going to be having a summit this summer as well, like a deconstructing parenting summit. So that's kind of like what's coming up next for our podcast and the work that we're doing, and we're really excited about that too.
That's fun. Those are some fun announcements that I'm not really sure I knew all
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
all
we
of
haven't
those. That's great.
revealed.
Yeah.
This will be the big reveal about the summit. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, we're
That's
really
awesome.
excited. We're going to have 10 different like kind of experty people about parenting and deconstruction and stuff. And it'll be a lot deeper than any podcast. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Oh,
July,
cool.
hopefully. We're shooting for July.
So there are 1,000 places people can find you on the internet. And for all of those different projects, they're probably all in lots of different places, but the podcast, where do people listen to the podcast? What's the easiest place for people to follow you through the podcast? Esther.
Oh, me. Okay. I mean, deconstructingmamas.com. It's very easy. Thankfully that domain name was available. We grabbed it a couple of years ago, and that has all of our podcast episodes. We have a menu there. You can become part of our Patreon community, where we do extra bonus episodes, and we have a once a quarter deep dive with Liz and I as well.
That's wonderful. Both of you, thank you so much. This has been a delight as expected. This was really fun. You guys are fun. And I think you said earlier that maybe the two of you haven't been guests at the same time on a podcast before. And man, I'll tell you what, you should sell this. You should sell this dynamic. This works. This works.
Well, this is like 5 p.m. It's 5 p.m. for me, and this is usually my worst time.
Well,
of the day. So usually it's like after 4 p.m. like I start to sort of like
So it must be you, Matt. It must be you.
It must just be you. I know. It just must be you. Your energy has like brought me to life again.
Mm-hmm. I am a gift. I am a gift, aren't I?
You are a gift.
Both of you, thank you so very, very much. Everybody check out the Deconstructing Mamas podcast. Thanks, Liz and Esther. Hey, thanks to all you betweeners out there for listening to this episode of the Between Podcast. Make sure you visit between.church on the internet to sign up for our mailing list. That's probably the most important thing, our email list. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. You can check out our 5-minute sermons, 5-ish minute sermons that we post every week. Follow us on social media. We got daily prayers. We got all sorts of other content. And join our community fully. We invite everyone. You are welcome here, no matter who you are or where you're from, no matter what you believe or even if you believe, no matter who you love or how you love, no matter what anybody else has ever told you about you. You are welcome and loved and celebrated here at Between. You know, my favorite church is the space between people. Now go with God's love and create the church between.